Hey, welcome back. I'm watching Caleb clean. And then we have a motor job out there. We're just talking about what should we do, why we have nothing to do. And I was like, well, we can start pulling fluids out of it and disconnecting some stuff. And while we're waiting for the stragglers to come in, we had one customer who refused to pay a diagnostic charge on his commercial vehicle. We're like, okay, keep driving down the road. That's it. I'll stand here and I won't do anything. If we're not getting paid, I don't care. You know, his expectations were to pay nothing, and that wasn't going to happen here. So yesterday Caleb was doing a rack and pinion job and then doing other jobs in between a rack and pinion job, and the customer was complaining about noise and leaking. So I was the technician who road tested the vehicle originally and documented up my findings, and they were as muffler had hole in it, car is loud, left front hub bearing screaming, right front hub bearing loose, front end clunking, it has oversized tires, a small lift kit on it, sway bar links, sway bar to frame bushings, upper control arms, tire light was on, maintenance light was on, balance the tires in the front since we had the wheels off, brake pulsation, replaced the rotors, brake pads were newer recently. Customer declined everything but the rack and pinion job. And we set the tow on the car, and then we sent it out, and then the customer drove down the road and called back and complaining and says his car is pulling to the left.
I said he had to have the steering wheel to the right.
He's holding his car to the right to keep it on the road. Well, 130 was recently paved, and it's a horrible job, and they should refund the state of New Jersey for this job. So Caleb drives it down the back street and the car tracks straight. So I really wasn't going to do anything more for this guy since his front end needed so much work. And all we did was replace the rack and pinion and set the tow on his car. And regardless of how his vehicle handled after we're done is on him, because we told him it requires other work in the front end. So he's complaining, he's bitching, back and forth, and then he's got a weird noise, which Caleb and I weren't aware of, on top of all of his other noises in his vehicle. It turned out to be his oversized tires at full lock, grabbing a skid plate that we may or may not have disturbed a little bit. So after Caleb and I figured that out, he's still complaining about the noise in his front end, and we're like, no shit, dude. We told you from the rip that your car needs tons of other work besides a rack and pinion, and you declined that. And then there's nothing we're going to do. I try to explain it. You have one new part in your front end, and the rest of them are bad. So no matter where we set the wheel, the steering, whenever the vehicle gets off of our rack and pinion and onto another road, wherever parts are loose is going to move the alignment. And there's nothing I can do about that. Your front end is not tight anymore. We also advise replacing the struts at the same time while we're doing all this front end. We're not talking about front end rebuild, just fixing the obvious problems. So we closed at 5. I think I was here for at least 30 minutes past that.
You were here until 5:30.
Yeah, trying to explain to this guy past the shield discrepancy, which is, it's on us. We didn't catch it on full lock. And it didn't happen all the time, but we resolved it while he was here. But then he was just going on and on and on how his vehicle went straight before we worked on it. And now that it goes to one side after we were done. Well, your vehicle with all the worn parts, including a rack and pinion, will settle in, and your tires will actually just kind of buffer some of that sometimes. And then once you dial in the front end a little bit, it's trying to track straight, but it's not, because there's worn components or loose components still past a rack and pinion. So they didn't want to understand that, well, my worn out front end that's noisy and vibrating and clunking and banging, it went straight. Now I have one new part in there, and it doesn't go so straight. Well, you have to fix the rest of the car now. I mean, we're not going to sit here and dick around with his car for hours and hours and hours and try and get his car to go straight with worn out front end parts. It's just not going to happen, dude. So I said, well, take it someplace else and see if they'll align it with loose hub bearings, grinding hub bearings, worn out front end parts, and see how that all works out for you. I said, but we're not going to do that for you. You want it right, spend the money. We already told you before the job started you had multiple issues, and you didn't want to resolve any of them. So, you know, I don't feel bad for people. We say this is what it needs. If we didn't tell the guy he needed all this other work, I would say, hey, Caleb, bring it back in and just double check
Absolutely.
your work.
That makes sense.
Right, you know, no doubt. If I said there was no other work required, right, in his front end,
Then it's
and
obviously my.
then I would say, Caleb, you know, you have to tweak the front end a little bit or see what's going on
Yeah.
to compensate for that. But since I deemed so many other bad parts in his front end, absolutely not coming back on this lift. Anything else until he opens up his wallet and puts more parts in it.
Bad ball joints are the main thing, and you can't really align something with bad ball joints.
Well, the right front wheel bearing had play side to side. The left front hub bearing's grinding away. The sway bar frame's knocking. The struts are worn. The upper control arms, the ball joints are worn out on that. They were creaking. I was like, yeah, we're not going anywhere here unless you're spending some more money.
With bad ball joints and wheel bearings, it's going to track forever.
But I know for a fact, so Jay over at Pep Waste, before he retired, he said that Pep Waste would make him align people's cars with bad front ends. I'm like, why? He said the alignment is only good on the rack. I said, as soon as I get off the rack, the alignment's off, and people would complain all the time. I was like, why do you keep doing it? He goes, that's what they pay me to do. That's what they pay me to do. Me, you got bad front end parts, you don't get an alignment. You got bad tires, you don't get an alignment. We set the toe, that's not an alignment. All right, so I'm sure many other shops deal with this nonsense, but we just said, hey, go someplace else and have them align it. We only set the toe. You want your alignment still done wrong? Go pay someone to do it. You want it done right, we're your guys.